What's up guys, Maiko here. This video is called The Most Dangerous Thing About DMT. So this is kind of a response to the last Joe Rogan Experience podcast when he had Alex Jones on. And for those of you who are not aware of Alex Jones or are highly critical of him, I definitely suggest you check this episode out because he definitely makes a good case for seeing him just as an honest truth seeker rather than some kind of a manipulative person who just wants your money. And he really does have some of the most genuinely interesting things to say of anybody around today. You know, that being said, take it with a grain of salt because a lot of it is pretty fucking crazy. So basically, something he touches on in that video is this idea of how the Illuminati, the global elite, are using DMT in this way to communicate with higher dimensional entities and sort of establish what it is that they want. And he goes as far as saying that they have communicated, these interdimensional alien-like entities have communicated that they need us to cut our population down, among other things. And so let's talk about DMT really quick. Well, the thing is, nobody really knows what DMT does, at least not in the public realm. And perhaps this is somewhat ignorant to assume that the global elite don't know. But I've lost count of how many times I've personally experimented with it, so I feel like I have some level of expertise whereby I can commentate on it. I've also lost count of the amount of times I've drank ayahuasca, which is the oral form, or the digested form. Much longer and more intimate sort of experience with it. So let me tell you what I think DMT does. Basically, it's going to sound like I'm downplaying its effects to a certain extent, but I'm not. Well, I might be a little bit. So here's the thing. Do I believe that DMT connects you with higher dimensional entities? Yes, I do. Do I believe that these entities are sovereign, individual entities that are actually in a higher dimension that have power over our dimension? Somewhat. Now, do I believe that these entities are impersonal, as in not connected to the user of the DMT, but some kind of external, separate entity that is sort of like an archon or like an arbiter of these lower dimensions? Not necessarily, and this is where the problem lies. So essentially, what I believe DMT does is I think it connects you to a dimension that is normally outside of our grasp, outside of our experience, and it's the same dimension that you go to when you dream. And spiritually speaking, in metaphysical circles, they call this the astral plane. So I think that's where you go. But what is the astral plane, really? So this is the part that's going to sound like I'm downplaying it. I believe the astral plane, the DMT realm, is really just, well, it's the imagination. It's the hyper-imagination. What you experience on DMT is a hyper-imagined state where you are experiencing the realm of the imagination so much more viscerally. And here's the thing. So when I say this, it sounds like I'm downplaying it a lot. It sounds like, oh, what you're experiencing is just in your head. You know, it's just a personal experience. It has no connection to the outside world. Now that's where I'm not downplaying this. So in order to understand why I'm not downplaying this, even though I'm claiming that DMT is just hyperactivating the imagination, is because you need to understand the imagination is not just inside your head. The imagination, like consciousness, is a product of a circuit that is an interface between two things. It's your own personal brain, your personal experience, but also the external reality, right? So, sorry, I'm trying to get over here. So when you look around, human beings are a great example of this. when you look around, go outside, go anywhere. I mean, as long as you're not in nature, if you're in human society, then you are literally walking around inside the imagination. A lot of what has been built around us was built by very intelligent, very self-directed, and intentional individuals. You could give a lot of credit to the Freemasons, and they probably have understood these higher dimensional realms a lot better than others throughout history. But you are literally walking through the imagination. All these buildings, this car, the phone, or the device that you're watching this on, all of this stuff was once exclusively inside the mind. And these are products of the mind. And they have transitioned into physicality, into the material world. But they were first and will always be inevitably tied to the imagined plane. And so, in this sense, the imagination is not some, woo-woo, bullshit plane that doesn't matter, and it's just as ridiculous as any fucking thing that, goes on inside the mind of any fucking animal or anything like that. Especially when you're talking about human imagination, it's actually far more powerful. And we are literally living in our imaginations. So when you are visiting the DMT world, you are walking around in a metaphysical plane that is very real, and it is not just inside your head, it is a combination. And these entities that you interact with are a combination of both your own personal, what you might call spirit animals. It's sort of your own personal outlook on what higher dimensional entities would look like. And this external sort of socio-cultural dimension where we have certain archetypes that we share as a species and as a community, as a culture, as a society, as the entirety of human civilization. And these things manifest themselves as these entities, I believe. And that's what we're witnessing. So let's look at this really quick. When you're talking about DMT, you are dealing with well, let's look at patterns, right? So if you're trying to understand objective reality, you have to look at patterns. You have to look at similarities. That's what science does, right? It's trying to discern what is the most consistent thing. By being doubtful, you can discern, what is bullshit and what is the most consistent thing. Sorry, I'm getting a call. So when it comes to DMT, there's certain similarities and certain differences among people's experiences. So as far as similarities go, most people report interacting with higher dimensional entities. A lot of people, there's a lot of similarities in terms of sort of what they look like. People describe bugs, people describe fractals, people describe sacred geometry, higher dimensions, and that sort of thing. Now let's look at the differences. A lot of the time, people see them differently, right? You can smoke in a circle of friends, and you'll notice that everybody has a slightly different experience. Some people see entities that look like elves. Some people see them that look like fractals. Some people see Tron people. Some people will see bugs. Some people will see frogs. My good friend just was telling me about his experience where he saw a frog, and then in another experience he saw an entity that looked like Tot or Thoth from the Egyptian lore. So that's the thing. There's similarities and there's differences. And so my conclusion about this is that, well, it seems kind of obvious that what we're interacting with is partially imagined in our personal sense, and then it's partially based on these archetypes that sort of exist in the collective imagination. So now let's get to the bottom of this video. What is the most dangerous part of DMT? The most dangerous part is assuming that these things are more real than that. Assuming that when you're interacting with these higher dimensional entities that exist in an archetypal realm of our socio-cultural complex of civilization, and then you assume that they're not a product of our collective intelligence as humans, but they are actually a completely separate sort of powerful alien entity, an extraterrestrial, right? Like a god. If you think that you are actually talking to a deity and it is telling you things, then you are going to assume that what those entities are telling you should be taken 100% seriously, and there's no two ways about it. And so when, Alex Jones is talking about these Illuminati members that are going deep as part of these top secret military studies to try and figure out what the aliens want, and he says that the aliens are saying, we got to cut our population in half, we got to, resort to these sort of reptilian ways of thinking and all this bullshit. Well, who the fuck is saying that? I mean, Alex Jones says it, right? He claims to get this information from sources. It doesn't surprise me, honestly. It's very powerful shit, DMT is. And I would not be surprised if the military, it's almost obvious to me that the military, or at least other secret societies, have been interacting with the substance for a long time. But the problem is, we don't know. We don't really know. And if anyone knows anything, especially in the Illuminati, in the Gnostics, the most important thing about Gnosis is that you can't simply trust what you hear and what's given to you. You can't just take somebody's word for it. True Gnosis is about experience. It's about, getting a level of proof through personal experience. And the thing is that, if the government has a select handful of people that are doing these experiments, then we're just taking their word for it. What if they have personal or financial interests in a certain sense? What if these guys, I'm sure you've heard of the New World Order. What if these guys are working for the New World Order and they have very wealthy clients that want to cut off half the population because, we're dirty animals, and they want to have the place all to themselves and have more resources so that they can, fucking come on each other in glass coffins, skull and bone style, with our resources, with the bones of our children. That's a very serious topic. And if somebody's going to be making those claims and say that they're hearing, messages from God, that's fine. But if our children's lives are at stake, it's not so fine. So that's the point of the video, guys. Just, government, Illuminati, if you're listening, don't just take someone's word for it, That's ridiculous. Don't fucking do that. And be wary, because the fact of the matter is, if some people are, trying to cut the population in half and resort to antics like that, which are just completely cruel, heartless, and unnecessary, and you're working for them and you're enabling that kind of behavior, then you're not doing your fucking job, If you're a sovereign individual, that's the whole point of sovereignty, right? The whole point of sovereignty is so that you yourself can be a unique individual processing unit within this manifold of consciousness, so that you can put your foot down if the time comes. And if you're not able or willing to do that, then you are nothing more than a slave, and you truly have no identity or sovereignty. So that's some food for thought, you guys. I hope you like this video, and please share this one. I think it's very important, and we should not kill half the population because some fucking DMT elves in our collective imagination told us to. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.